Hello, this is Angela with Parco's Permaculture. Long time no see, y'all. It has been over a week since I have been up and about. I've been super sick. Not the Rona, probably influenza. It is the sickest I have been in a really long time, and I'm still not really 100%. If I seem really perky in this video, it's because I've had far too much coffee today, and that's helping me get through despite the fact that I'm still coughing and I'm still really tired. So I have a whole stack of notes for many videos that I've wanted to make, and I've just been too sick to do it. So this is today's video, notes here, actually is a subject that I wanted to film a week ago. So it's still entirely relevant. I'm filming from my bedroom today, and that's because we're having what's called full spring in Portland, which is unusually warm and sunny weather. And so everybody is outside using power tools. If you've watched my videos over the years, you know that I have a frequent level of frustration with the amount of noise, but also that's what you get when you live in the city and you have neighbors who are working to take care of their property and their homes and things like that. So I can't begrudge them. I'm not a quiet neighbor. We're often doing home improvement projects. So, so be it. But that means I can't really film outdoors today because I keep trying and it's just so freaking loud. And I can't film anywhere else in the house because I have children spread out around the house working on school projects. So we're stuck being in my bedroom today. And I hope you don't mind that we're not out in the permaculture garden. But what we're going to be talking about is highly relevant to permaculture or to any kind of gardening. So today I want to talk about 8 different ways that you can approach winter tasks in your garden. And this is late winter. We're talking right now in January and in February and in early March. These are 8 things I'd just like to knock out really quickly that you can think about how you want to prioritize them in your garden. I know for me, I'm at various stages of completion with each of these 8 things because life. And so when you're thinking about them, you can order them in a different order if you want, and some of them may be more relevant to you than others. And also, I'm in Zone 8B in Portland, Oregon, and we have mild, muddy, rainy winters. The ground where you are may be completely frozen right now, and some of these tasks are utterly unapproachable for you until later in the spring. So, take what I'm talking about here and tweak it and finesse it so that it works for where you are, because permaculture is site-specific design. All right, so number 1 is fruit tree pruning, also berry bushes to some extent. So it's really important when we look at fruit tree pruning in late winter, you want to prune when the wood is dormant, if at all possible. And also I do a summer prune. So this isn't my only prune of the year, but this is my big pruning for shaping and thinking about flowering in the spring. Now, based on what kind of fruit you're growing, your pruning methods are going to be different. So really make sure that you take this time, if you are new to pruning in your orchard or your fruit, 1 or 2 fruit trees, however many you have, that you understand the growth and flowering habit. Is your apple tree a tip bearer? Then you definitely don't want to be pruning off and lowering the height of your tree right now, or you're going to lose all your blossoms for the spring. Is your pear tree slow to produce spurs, as most pear trees are? Then you definitely don't want to be hacking off wood that contains spurs. You want to preserve those. So please understand the way that your fruit tree produces blossoms and thus fruit, and make sure that you are pruning appropriately. It's also really important to understand pest and disease management when pruning. Here in the Pacific Northwest, stone fruit is incredibly prone to bacterial canker and a myriad of fungal diseases, all of which mean you should not prune them in wet weather. That means for me, I do most of my stone fruit pruning in the autumn when we have a dry spell in like October-ish, before the end of October and the rains return, because I don't want to be pruning when it's wet and soggy out, because I will be encouraging the infection of those fresh cuts with bacteria and fungi. And stone fruit's hard enough to grow, particularly peaches and even plums. And I want to prevent that kind of bacterial gummosis from being a problem for me this year. So I'm going to prune when it's not rainy. perhaps in full spring is a good idea because it's dry right now. If you want to be pruning out your honeyberries and your blueberries and things like that, totally go for that now. If you neglected your cane fruit in the autumn when you should have been removing all of the fluorocanes and stringing up your primocanes, you can also do that right now. Keep in mind what was a primocane last year is this year's fluorocane, and it will have become a little bit more rigid over the winter, so just be aware that you aren't snapping off or breaking. Handle those with care as you are stringing them up. I'm going to do my roses in February. I do my rambling roses in August, but late winter is also a time that I am pruning my climbing roses, like my beloved Jude the Obscura, which I will wax endlessly about because I think it's the best rose ever. But all my climbing roses are going to get pruned in February on a dry day. Okay, number 2, clearing. What I mean by this is we've done all of this pruning. We've hacked back all kinds of stuff. Maybe you've let a lot of your dead vegetative matter stand for the winter to provide habitat, and you're ready to think about starting to clear some of that back over the next couple months to get ready for spring. Any of the woody matter or herbaceous material, we need to clear that back and kind of tidy up the garden. Now, you don't have to, particularly if you have kind of a more wild permaculture approach. You may not have to do that. That may not be something that you're after. But for me, living in the city, I need to be careful about where I'm piling up material. Am I going to attract rodents that way? And am I just going to make a mess? Like, I don't have enough room to just let things lay where they fall. So for me, clearing and cleaning up is a big job. Now, someone recently came and took a ton of my prunings because she's starting a hugel bed. She posted in our local gardening group and said, hey, does anybody have prunings? And I was like, I have a ton of prunings, including goumyberry prunings, which release a lot of nitrogen as they break down. So she came and got a bunch of my prunings, which was great. Share the surplus. I had prunings that I would be composting in my yard. They would go to add fertility back into my system, but somebody else in my community could make immediate use of them far better than I could. So it was great. It solved issues for both of us, and I was grateful that she came and got those. If you are thinking about how you need to use up prunings and branches and limbs, a hugel bed may be right for you. If you want to keep your system closed and keep your prunings on site, a hugel bed can be a good way to clean up and make use of the fertility that is stored in those branches. And as they decompose, they will add fertility to your hugel bed, and you'll have a really lush, rich place in which to grow your veggies. So if you aren't familiar with hugel culture, there's tons of information on the internet, and I'll drop a few links in the description for more info on that. Number 3, consider rotating in your livestock. Now, for me, this looks like ducks and chickens. I obviously don't have goats or rabbits or anything like that, but this is a great time of year when all our herbaceous perennials are completely dormant, and things like slugs are proliferating, and there's lots of weed seeds that are out and about for things that maybe in September I didn't get back to deadheading my weeds and putting the weed seeds in the compost bin. So there's a lot for my ducks and chickens to feast on. So now is the time when I want to rotate them into areas of the garden where they don't normally get to roam because they're too destructive. And this is what it looks like for me. I used to have my ducks and chickens free ranging all off season in my sun trap veggie bed. And that just got too messy as the beds got deeper and deeper and deeper over time as I built up biomass. They just would scratch everything into the paths, and it was a giant mess. So now what I do in the winter when I'm pruning and cleaning up is I let the ducks and chickens out into those off limits parts of the yard only when I am outside. Now my ducks and chickens are trained to come when I shake a can of sunflower seeds, so that makes it much easier to get them back into their paddock than it would be if I had not trained them to do that. But for me, this lets them out for a controlled period of time where I'm keeping an eye on them. They're out there for like an hour, 2 hours, long enough to be getting rid of weed seeds and slug eggs and slugs and things like that, but not so long that they are scratching the heck out of my annual veggie beds. So if you have small livestock like bunnies or goats or ducks and chickens, think about having them be that controlled disturbance for short bursts of time where they are doing the work of cleaning up in an area, but you don't want them free ranging in it for long periods. Now in winter is the time to do that. Those herbaceous perennials are protected as they're died back to the ground, and it's a really ideal time to let your livestock do the work of weeding and pest removal for you in those short bursts. Okay, number 4, mulching. Now, if you watch my gajillion videos on mulching, I mulch a lot. I use chip drop all of the time. And part of that is because I have a bunch of kids, I have 2 big dogs. My paths need to get mulched all the time. I do my big path mulching in November usually, sometimes October, sometimes early December. But by November, the paths are really muddy, and if I can get chips, I put them in the paths. In late winter is when I am starting to mulch the beds themselves. So it's really handy in late winter. Everything is dormant, and that means it's much easier to just shovel chips onto the beds without having to tuck them around all of the foliage. I hate mulching in the late spring and summer because it means that I've got to carefully tuck the wood chips around plants. In the winter, when everything is dormant, I can just use my shovel, or sometimes I just up in the wheelbarrow and I have my wellies on and I just kick the mulch where I want it to go on the beds. It's really easy, and I find that it's much quicker to do it in the winter. Now, obviously, maybe you have a ton of snow and this is not something for you, but just also be aware if it is a time that you are putting down mulch, you don't want to bury your dormant perennials in like 8 or 12 inches of chips, right? So know what you have planted where, and just be judicious in not putting more than maybe 2 inches of chips on your dormant perennials. Don't want to smother them. Oh, my camera keeps wiggling. This is what happens when you sit on the bed and your camera's on the bed. You don't want to smother your dormant perennials. So just be aware of when you're mulching the beds, where your beloved, probably expensive and precious perennials are, and mulching liberally, but not so liberally that you're going to kill things and they won't come up in the spring. Okay, so those first 4 tasks are kind of active, out interacting with the garden tasks that you can do in late winter. The last 4 are much more passive tasks that are no less important for your cottage garden, your permaculture garden, your veggie garden, but they are just like on a different level. They're a different kind of engagement. So number 5 is observing in the garden. This is really important because your plants have to live outside all year long. Your livestock has to interact with the weather all year long. While you can be comfy and bedded down in your house, everything outside in your landscape doesn't have that benefit. So observing and understanding the weather patterns and what's happening in your garden in winter is super important. Where is the rain falling? Where is the snow falling? Where does the wind blow in the winter? Where does the wind blow your snow? Where does the water run in the winter? Are you ending up with boggy areas where water is accumulating? Pay attention to those. Pay attention to the microclimates that are created in the winter. One thing for me that's been really important in observing in the winter is where the winds blow, and a lot of plants are quite sensitive to wind damage. Now for us, the winds blow from this direction I'm pointing this way, from the east, from the Columbia Gorge, a significant portion of the winter. So I want to make sure any of my plants that are prone to wind damage or more susceptible to wind damage are sheltered from that wind, are planted in an area where that's not going to be an issue. And sometimes in summer or late spring when I'm planting and propagating, I might not be thinking about what the winter weather is going to be like, but it's really important that we take time now to observe and understand the patterns of our property in the winter and plan appropriately. Number 6 is reading, taking time to educate yourself. Now, every time I talk about a gardening book on this channel, I get lots and lots of comments that are, thank you so much. I'm really glad you made this recommendation. I read this book that you talked about and I really learned something. Could you please share more of your favorite permaculture or gardening books on this channel? So in 2022, I'm going to try and be more intentional about sharing resources, sharing books, and talking up authors that have been really important to me and also I feel have a really good approach to permaculture. There's a lot of stuff out there that seems more like an academic approach from folks who haven't actually had that much application, or who make recommendations that I have found don't work in real life. So I'm going to stick to this year really talking up those authors that I feel have really good content, really good literature that they've produced based on research and experience. Basically, if there's a permaculture book out there, I have read it, and I've probably read it 3 or 4 times. I spend a lot of time in the winter reading what other people have to say and trying to glean from them. I find that books are a great way we can have the permaculture ethic of share the surplus. Folks are sharing their knowledge and expertise, and that makes all of our permaculture stronger. So you can start at your local library. That's a great resource for looking for permaculture and gardening books. There's tons of gardening books that are available in my library system that are specific to my region of the country and to my growing zone. So you may find that there are the same at your library, books that I wouldn't know to recommend because you live somewhere with a very different climate and very different conditions. But your local library more than likely will stock those locally focused, regionally focused gardening books. And those are a great resource you should check out right now in the winter where there's not as much to do outside. Number 7, planning and visioning. What do you want to do for 2022? What are your garden goals? What has worked well? What didn't work well last year? Are there ways you want to expand? Are there ways you want to cut back? Don't just go flinging yourself into the spring without a plan. For me, I tend to be kind of a hyper planner, an over planner, an overthinker, but I often tend to bite off much more than I can chew, and I make no buffer in my schedule for things like illness, things like hardship, things like injury. And so I'm trying to be better about that for 2022 and not take on more projects than I can feasibly get done. Like last year's project, my greenhouse, which I ended up not being able to finish because I had to take care of my dad through a stroke and then a subsequent surgery and a lot of rehab. And so I just didn't have as many hours as I thought. So think about your planning and what you want the garden to look like and what you reasonably think you can get done. Included in this planning and visioning, I would say if you haven't ordered your seeds and you haven't ordered your bare root trees and shrubs, do it right now. Do it right now before they sell out. Okay, number 8. Might not seem relevant to the garden to you, but it really is resting. Your garden is resting. It's the winter. You need to be resting as well. Now, this is absolutely a case of do as I say and not as I do, because I'm terrible at this and I'm trying to be more intentional about it. Make sure that you are taking downtime so that you don't start off the intense garden year exhausted already. May, not a time where you're going to have space for rest and downtime. August, you're just going to be harvesting and preserving and probably watering like crazy. You will not have time for rest. Look at the rhythm of the year. The year is giving you an opportunity to rest and recharge right now. I will say it until I'm blue in the face. Take advantage of it. I will try and be better about modeling that. I have been terrible at it, but I feel that it's a really, really necessary thing to not get run down and exhausted and to be able to start ourselves off for this gardening year with success built into our plan. When we are rested and recharged, we are setting ourselves up for success. And as I say a lot on this channel, that's what we want to do. We want to be successful. We want to do permaculture. We want to garden and we want to be successful at it. We don't want to crash and burn. So don't start off with an empty tank. Take that time to rest. So thanks for watching today. Thanks for hanging out with me, even though I'm not out in my garden. I hope that you all are staying well and safe. I hope that you can find time to figure out how you can work in these 8 important winter tasks, how relevant they are to you, how applicable they are to your permaculture and your garden design, and how you can make sure that you are getting ready to start the garden year this spring with success. I'll be back really soon. In the interim, you can check out my Patreon down in the description, or you can throw a couple bucks at my PayPal, which doesn't take a big fat cut like Patreon does. So that would be awesome. If you want to support this channel, just throw a couple bucks at my PayPal. I have upcoming videos that I really want to do on late winter seed starting and plant propagation. I am still working on my hedgerow project, and I'm working on moving things, although obviously not for the last week because I was sick. But this is also the time of year when I need to think about the plants that I need to get going from seed. So I want to be sharing that and try and do it in a really timely manner, understanding that where you are, you're probably going to need to be starting those things about when I am. And I want to make sure that I am sharing that with you, sharing that process with you and what has worked for me. So all right, I'll be back soon. I'm going to go have another cup of coffee and try and get through the rest of my day. You guys take care. I'll be back.